Good evening again. Starting out, please do not use your cell phones at all during the presentation. We would like to thank Pastor Kurt Johnson, the Board of Directors and the ushers from the Plymouth Church for hosting this event for the City of Sherrill. We greatly appreciate all you have done to accommodate us. We'd also like to thank our technician, Mark Sherman. Certainly we couldn't do it without him. He makes it real easy for us, Computer 101, whatever. Anniversary shirts, wine glasses, beer mugs, and other souvenirs are still available at City Hall. We will be selling sets of history talks on DVD. Please sign up at the front table if you are interested in these. The nominal cost is $15 for the set of 8. There will be a 100th anniversary student art show this week, the week of the celebration, with the reception in the city courtroom Sunday, July 24th. Please stop in during the week to view all the creativity we have in Sherrill. The show will be open until 8 each evening. We have 2 speakers this evening. We will introduce the speaker who will give their presentation. Please save questions and comments for the end of the evening. Out of respect of the speaker, please hold any conversations or comments until that time. And thank you for attending, and we hope to see you at the final 2 history talks. The next talk will be June 5th, not next week, Memorial Day, so we'll go out and celebrate and have picnics and have a good old time. But on June 5th, keeping on the lights, water running, and keeping the city clean by Gordy Silsby, Dave Hill, and myself. And also protecting paradise, the police and fire departments, by Brian Carroll.
Our first speaker tonight is Tom Tixon. Tom is a graduate of EBS and SUNY Oswego and has been a Sherrill resident since 1993. Tom and his wife Shannon have 3 grown children, Pat, Amy, and Mark, all VBS graduates. Tom has been a volunteer coach for VBS area boys and girls youth basketball and baseball programs. He was one of the founders of the Oneida area AYSO soccer program and served as its commissioner. Tom retired in 2014 after a 38-year career in local community banking. He served on the city's planning board for 20 years and is a communicant of St. Helena's Church. And Tom is our newest city commissioner, elected in 2015.
Well, they give me this cool technology stuff, and I'm not a techie, but Linda got my obituary off the internet when I was elected to Sherrill, so someday in the very, hopefully in the distant future, you'll read that again. Linda put the bite on me to be a speaker. It's very hard to say no to Linda. She works so hard at this stuff. And before I get going, I really do think, Gary and Linda have just done yeoman's work on this. They've orchestrated a series of these historical discussions, and there's a huge amount of work. And I'm going to miss getting the emails, Linda, because that's her, yeah, thanks. But they've done wonderful. So we're going to start with the post office today. Now, Linda gave me these topics, and I'm thinking, I got to get up here and talk about brick and mortar. I got 4 things. I got a bank, I got a post office, with all due respect to the library and city hall, to all these things. So I like to focus a little bit on the people that made all this stuff happen, because stuff happens because of people. So we're going to start with the post office, because that's how Sherrill began, as we know it, and how Turkey Street, which was our original name, evolved into Sherrill. At that time, way back when, 1888, the citizens of Turkey Street became tired of getting their mail at Kenwood Station or Verona or Oneida Castle. So in order for Sherrill to establish a post office, those postmasters had to give their blessing. They had to sign off and grant their permission. So our local congressman did the rest of the work in Washington to make it happen. So in 1888, our first post office was opened on the corner of Betzinger Road and Seneca Ave, Kenny's Market. So they also say that at that time we had to have the permission of the adjacent postmasters, but also the stagecoach delivery driver had to sign off on this as well. Congressman James Sherman from Utica, who was later our 27th Vice President, named our city after his young son, Sherrill Sherman. So we have him to thank and his ego for labeling us, or we'd be Turkey Street 13461, probably. So that's how Turkey Street became Sherrill, because of the post office. So, again, I want to kind of talk a little bit about people. The first post office were held in people's houses. So in 1888, James Graves had the post office in his house. In 1889, Henry Thomas wanted it, and it was political in those days, so the post office went to Mr. Thomas's home. In 1893, it went back to Mr. Graves' house. 1897, went back to Mr. Thomas's. So I don't know how anybody can figure out where to go get the mail in those days. Because you'd have to check with somebody. Gordy wasn't around then, contrary to popular belief. So you didn't have him to ask. So in 1908, it relocated to the old Place building, which is the Legion. In 1916, the post office went across the street from the Legion to the Corona building, where it remained until it came down to Sherrill Road. But as early as, let's see, isn't this cool? See, $80,000 in 1937 was earmarked for the new post office by the government. $80,000 to build the post office as early as 1937. So, for many years, we had a satellite post office in the factory complex. And that's Ray Walker, and that's Paul Jones. So those are names familiar to a lot of us. So Oneida Limited during those days was really rocking and rolling with the promotional business, the Betty Crocker stuff, and the Melmine, and the spoons and stuff. So there was thousands of pieces weekly. That's in the factory. And they used to grade the post offices. They classified them 4, 3, 2, 1, 1 being the highest volume. We were for a small city, town, we were a class 1 post office. So in 1940, this is what our staff looked like. All these people, and I actually have names of those, so I'm going to go through because I don't know who's related to who here, or whatever. And I sat down with Gordy, and he gave me everybody's name. 1940. Now, Bernie Lucy didn't even start till 46. Right, 1 cent stamps in 1946, right, Bernie? Right, you started, next year they went to 2 cents, the year after Bernie started, but that's just a coincidence, right? But that's Clarence Sanderson, Bert Moore, R. Egan, Earl Nodecker, and Ed Honeyman. And I stand corrected, Jack Stone is the one who gave me all these names. Ray Walker, he was the guy in the picture before. Gerald Graves. This is Mildred Quackenbush. And Gus Sherrill. So I throw that out just in case anybody has any relatives there. So for many years, until the mid-50s, there were 2 daily deliveries in Sherrill. We had morning and afternoon. And that's how a lot of them got there. That's Ed Nodecker on his bicycle. Jack gave me that name too. In fact, you should have just done this, Jack. Okay. So, construction on new post office began in 1961. Now, if I go back here, in 1937, they allocated the funds, $80,000 to build the post office. They got around to it in 1961. So, some things don't change, I guess. But interestingly enough, that's George Basher there. George built a lot of houses here in Sherrill. That's my first house George built. And Carl Erlacher. So they're, and that's, I mean, there's not a lot of places the post office was since this time. That's where they did, because they tried to centrally locate this post office, and it's still there today. But for many years, a couple things that was pretty interesting. For many years, the post office was noted and honored for all the flowers. That was the new post, for all the flowers. Remember how pretty it always used to look and everything? Not that it doesn't look pretty now, but yeah, Paul Jones, right? Under the care of Paul Jones, and he was awarded many awards by the post office, but this is from the Sherrill Garden Club. And that's young Gordy Silsby, that's Eleanor Smilo, Betty Hayes, Paul Jones, and if anybody knows who this is, Jack Stone didn't know, so Paul just, it was a labor of love for him. John Sullivan was the postmaster at the time and tortured Paul for all those years with the flowers. He said, you know, he would work on it before work, after work, and on his lunch hour he'd eat a quick sandwich, and that was a real labor of love. And I always remember going to the post office and how good it smelled in there. Remember how you could just smell, everything smelled so good in there. So, nothing really much changed to the post office, but in 1991, for our 75th anniversary, a special cancellation stamp was offered, and for $5, Sully, John Sullivan, that's what he looked like back then, that's what he looks like now. That's a before and after. But for $5, people had the cancellation stamp, and Sully sat there, and I guess, and it was, as with everything artistic good in the city, it seems like Don Cornway had his hand in that too, because he designed the gazebo stamp that went on that, and the first one was issued to a collector from Ohio. So, just a couple other little sidebars on the post office. The United Limited Sales Office had the Kenwood Station Post Office for many years, which was a satellite of Oneida. It really had to do Sherrill, but everybody thought it did. And our current post office is leased from Coast Construction in Rhinebeck. So they own our building there. And our current post office is now known as a RMPO. There's the term I learned. And remotely managed post office now, because we don't have a postmaster anymore. So we're under the arm of Oneida. So that's all I got on the post office. I got Bernie Lucy here, and I talked to Gordy Silsby and Sully, and they were very helpful in giving me the information. So without further ado, I'm going to slide into the library. Which I gotta admit, I never spent a lot of time in the library. And so I really did have to start at ground zero, and Mary Kay Jungle was really helpful to me on this one too. So, but I really, as I started getting into this brick and mortar stuff, I really became, I have a lot of appreciation for our library, and it's really been a model of how to do things the right way and how to plan and how to, and the benevolence that went to make this happen. Our library is known, the Sherrill Kenwood Free Library is known as an association library. We're controlled by a private board of trustees elected by library members. The good part is there's no municipal library tax, which supports the library, unlike a lot of our brethren in surrounding communities. In 1900, the library began as a cupboard of books in the old Trap Factory, which is the United Limited plant. And up there off Route 5, and then down the knife plant, aka the Silk Factory. there was another shelf down there. So in 1921, the library grew and temporarily relocated to Willow Place, where the Legion was. Everything seems to have gone through there so far. And then the CAC and then Sherrill High School. In 1921, a new building was built on East Noyes Boulevard. It's right behind the post office. It was designed by the noted local architect Theodore Skinner and was financed through the generosity of a nice lady by Harriet Johnson, her estate. Somebody by the name of G.N. Allen supervised the construction library and also the addition in 1938. Again, mostly financed by Mrs. Johnson's assets, estate, and also with work progress administration grants, which Mr. Allen secured for this project. This Mr. Allen, who I don't know if anybody knew him.
That was Ham Henry.
Yeah.
That was their dad.
That was their dad. Okay. But he's an interesting guy. I got to kind of know him a little bit, reading through this stuff. He's a great benefactor, but he also had a lot of vision. And when they built the library behind the post office, he made sure it could easily be retrofitted into a residential property, which it is today. So, but perhaps his greatest gift to the library was his vision, because he arranged way back when for Night Limited to reserve the location where the library is now, and that was about 1948. So his farsightedness, locked up the location for the library. So the library began planning for the eventual expansion of the Sherrill Road reserved property, culminated in 1969 with an extensive fundraising campaign. And Marshall Frisky and Bill Larson. I know Margaret's here someplace, so yep, there she is. So they were the chairman of the building fund, and they had the huge goal at the time of $10,000, and that was quite a bogey to try and get. So the drive began in January of '69. This was the brochure. Some of you may remember that. So it began in January 1969, concluded in May, and raised $12,661.50, so well over the goal of $10,000. And this Let's Give Ourselves a Gift in 1969 fundraising campaign, was designed to increase the library space from 1,400 square feet to approximately 3,000. So the new library cost approximately $70,000. So I went back to the post office. In 1937, they set aside $80,000 for the post office. And 30 years later, we got that done, but I'm sure it cost a lot more than 80. But $70,000 to build the new library. All of it was private contributions, general library funds, and proceeds from the sale of the existing building. They took out a very small mortgage, which was paid off through additional contributions very promptly. Oneida Limited donated the land that Mr. Allen had strong-armed him into getting way back when, and $20,000. But the biggest thing was the Free Library Board and the Building Fund Committee were committed by saying there'll be no increases in city taxes for this building. So that's kind of refreshing. And many communities, as I mentioned, have a library tax. So these were the people on the library board at the time. Bill Larson, Winifred Pettigrew, Don Towsley, Harry Bowen, I know Winnie's here someplace too, Harriet Bowen, Lucian Sprague, Edie Smith, Dorothy Becker, Gene Bigger was the librarian, and the Building Fund Committee, Jerry Whalen Smith, Marshall Frisky, Craig Kroll, who sends his best from Rochester, and somebody named Flora Clark, who I know is sitting out there. That's right, Flores and Johnny Zorn, and Bob Reed was the architect on that. So I think it's appropriate to remember those people and who put this together. Groundbreaking was August 9th. And they go on left to right, Marshall Frisky, Don Talbot, Lucian Sprague, that's Harriet Bowen's, they gave her the shovel. And then Bill Larson, Edie Smith, and Winifred Pettigrew. So they turned the ground over on August 9th. So it was completed in March of 1970. And April 6th was 1970 was moving day in our new library. So how does Sherrill move 15,000 books? That's good old Sherrill elbow grease. Craig Cole took that picture. On that day, they had over 200 volunteers. Now remember, here's the new library, and the old library was over here, behind it. So right down the post office parking lot, they had a conga line full of volunteers passing books through, and between 8 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon, it all got done. That's just amazing. You think about that. All these, they had Little League teams and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and everybody over there. It was quite a deal. In 1969, the Sherrill Kenwood Library joined Mid-York Library System, which is currently a 43-member cooperative organization which shares services. And then the next major library funding campaign, Library for Tomorrow, that was Stu Hill and Beverly Messenger-Harris raised $100,000 between 1995 and 1997 to update and renovate the library, which included all kinds of things to make it more accessible, and a reading room and things like that. In 2010, the children's room was dedicated as Kathy's Kids Corner in memory of Kathy Dorman, who served as library board president for 6 years and died way too young. Bonnie Unsworth was the library director at the time, and she got her husband Don to be the project engineer, and there's Don Cornwell again. He's making the plaques, and he and Bob Moore are also working on that, so more Sherrill volunteer efforts. I thought I'd throw some numbers into this because our current library budget is $117,198. It's funded by the city of $50,750, the town of Vernon $13,000, Oneida County $6,670. The balance comes from the people, library investments, fundraising, and donations. And even though it's a Sherrill Kenwood public free library, City of Oneida cut off their funding in 2011. So Mary Kay had to give me all kinds of statistics on this, which was really pretty interesting. That night, these are all circa 2015. 24,000 visitors last year. They circulated 37,000 items, loaned 3,600 items to other libraries in the Mid-York system. Our library website was viewed over 18,000 times, 3,900 times. Our computers were used, everything from job searches, visas and passports, research, medical information, homework, exams, and a variety of other needs. So, to wrap this up, I'd say we're currently fortunate to have Mary Kay Jungman as our librarian since July of 2015. And if you don't know who Mary Kay is, she's the red-faced lady who's mad at me for calling attention to her right now. I know she's sitting out there someplace, I don't want to make eye contact with her. So, City Hall. April 7, 1916, we became a city, and then we had to have a place to put our stuff, so we ended up with, as everything else started in the dormitory there of the Legion, it seems like, but we're housed downstairs in the dormitory building on Sherrill Road for 50 years, from 1916 to 1966. We didn't own our own City Hall. So our first true City Hall in 1965 was constructed on the corner of West Noyes Boulevard and Sherrill Road. I stole this picture from Gary last week. You saw that. It's the old Sherrill Hardware. And he pointed out the Flying A gas thing there. And it all seems like we've got the community chest thing there, and they're going forever, even before there was City Hall. So, and that building served Sherrill well for 30 years until we just ran out of space, parking, and handicapped accessibility issues. So we led to construction of our current location on Sherrill Road. That was the old one. And the commission started looking at that, and these were the original drawings, which didn't turn out that way. Talking to Dwight Evans, who orchestrated this with the commission at that time, they really wanted it to fit in with the existing architecture of Sherrill. So you see from the original drawings, many improvements were made from that. The dormers were designed after the dormers on the Skinner block. They wanted to put the dormers in there after the Skinner block. And the transition from brick to the tan color was similar to Christ Church. So those are some of the construction phases. You can see the dormers, and then that's brick and that's not. So it opened in 1997. There was no bonding, no debt, no loans. Provided a much more taxpayer-friendly location with ample space, parking, as I mentioned, and everything is there centrally located: the city offices, city court, where it doubles for meetings for the commission, elections, police department, and the Sherrill Kenwood Volunteer Fire Department. So we were able to concentrate at that time most of the city municipal services in one location. So that's that on City Hall. Right, Dwight? All right. Now we're talking about banking in Sherrill. Sherrill's first bank was started as the First National Bank of Sherrill in February of 1926. And our first home was, oh, there we are. We're in the basement of the morgue. The stock was issued to fund the new bank. It sold out in 5 hours. Everybody wanted to be a stockholder of the new bank. And the first hours of the bank, some things don't change, 9 to 3 daily and 9 to 12 on Saturday. So, but they had Monday evening hours from 6:30 to 8. So in June 1926, the bank relocated to a location, the Skinner store block on Sherrill Road. And Gary put me on the spot last week because he wouldn't tell you what the bank was. The location where it is now is the Zero Food Locker building, which is the current location. And 1950, the bank bought that and they started the renovation. I can tell you from working in there, you'd go in on a Monday morning and it was such an airtight building, we'd have a ventilation, we didn't have windows open. There was no air moving in there. It was all stale and they were very close, and that was a lovely place to be on a Monday morning. It's been shut down all weekend. So we moved after extensive remodeling, and the bank is laid out the same way now as it was back in June of '51. The vault, tower line's still the same place, the layout's still the same. The key individual in the organization that broke the bank was Leon Hill. Son Stu Hill, I just mentioned the library, and Dave Hill will be talking about the infrastructure here at Sherrill next week as the third generation. But he was the original bank director, stockholder, and he was appointed president in 1934. And when he was president of the bank, he also held the position as director of purchases for Oneida Limited at the same time. So he had 2 jobs. Go figure that. So 1952, this was, Sherrill woke up to find out that the bank had a $50,000 shortage. Ooh. This is the drama part of my presentation. 2 bank employees were charged. In connection, the FBI was in, the full audit was conducted, they circled the wagons, and it was determined the loss was closer to $140,000 and it happened over a 24-year period. Look at all the reaction I'm getting on. In February of '52, the bankers pleaded innocent, but they changed their plea several days later. And these 2 bankers admitted to the crime, but one died unexpectedly the day after changing their plea. The other one eventually received probation for the crime. And this, again, Leon Hill, with all due respect to Dave Hill, I told him, yeah, I put a picture of him, I didn't, but I think there's a picture coming up. Yeah, there he is, right there, that's it. I've been scared to go in his office. He's a tough guy, but he held this whole thing together. He was a tower of strength. It was only his reputation and his integrity which held the bank together, because generally speaking, these days, if you have a defalcation, which is another way of saying you got your hand in the cookie jar, if you have that, they come in and they just take you over and that's it. But the depositors were all made whole. They got, the private insurance came in. One of the bankers gave them more money than he actually took, which I guess it's compound interest. But 80% of the loss was recovered with the bank reserves, so everybody was made whole, and was finalized in April of 1952. So December 51, April of 1952, how quick that was, nice, neat, and it was all taken care of. Because FDIC insurance at that time only went up to $10,000, but it never had to be exercised, because if it had been called, the bank would have been seized by the FDIC. In April of 54, they merged with the United Valley National Bank of Oneida, and when they merged, there was $2.3 million in the bank. They had assets in 1954. And just a couple little tidbits about the bank, because we got that far, got through the tumultuous 50s, but in 1964, the drive-through window was installed, which every bank's had a drive-through, right? But Sherrill had the first one. There was the first one in Oneida, VVS, Canastota, Rome. First one was here in Sherrill. Oneida Valley, which had taken over the First National Bank of Sherrill, became Alliance Bank in '98, and 5 years later became NBT Bank Corp, and it's in the same location today. So, thank you very much. That's all I got. I do want to say one more thing. I got about 4 more things. I'd like to say a couple. So thanks, my guardian angel and technology guru, Mark Kramer, helped put this PowerPoint together. He didn't help put it, he did it. So he made me look good. Again, Mark Sherman, Captain Video up in the loft there, he's great, and he helped make me look good by taking these things and putting them, give them some life. I had Jack Stone, I gave Jack proofread my final paper, and Professor Stone deemed it okay. I had an A-. And Craig Kroll, I spoke to him, and he was helpful in steering me around. And then what I did is my proofreaders for the post office, I had Ray Silsby and John Sullivan, I gave them copies of my shtick, and Dwight Evans was City Hall, the bank was Dave Hill, and again, Mary Kay Jungland proofed the library for me, so I'm very grateful for that. Thank you for your attention, and I guess we're going to turn you over to Steve, right?
We'll have a short stretch while we change microphones to our next speaker. This evening is Steve Peek II. Steve Peek grew up here in Sherrill. This isn't in his bio, but Steve and I go way back to teenage years because we both worked at Sunset Lake with his brother Bill. Here's Bill. Bill's back here too. From where? Buffalo, Rochester? Lewiston, okay, that way. Let's see, he attended VVS Central School and graduated in 1967. After graduating from SUNY Plattsburgh in 1971, he enlisted in the United States Air Force. Steve attended Officer Training School, Minuteman Missile Training, and was assigned to the 91st Strategic Missile Wing at Minot Air Force Base, Minot, North Dakota, where he spent the next 6 years as a Missile Combat Crew Commander. After serving in the Air Force, Steve and his wife Nancy returned to Sherrill to make their home. Steve worked for Not Limited as manager of industrial engineering until 1987, when he left to become a professor of management at Utica College, where he continues to teach today. Steve just finished singing in the chorale concert entitled Homeland, and if anyone was there, it was a wonderful concert.
Good evening. I hope I have some voice left so that I can get this presentation. I'd like to thank Linda Evans for just coordinating this whole thing. This is just absolutely wonderful that we've got a chance to learn some of the history. I know there are some of us that have created that history and others of us that are new here that fills in some of the gaps in some of the knowledge and all brings us closer together. I also want to thank Sarah Getman. Linda said Sarah's the one that will help you find the information in the archives. And well, we went over to City Hall. I figured, what, 5 or 6 little notebooks that we'll go through? There's like 180 or 90 notebooks that are 3D. Craig Crowell put those together. I don't know how he did that. It's an amazing effort. But it's all there by date and time. It's just an absolutely incredible amount. Way too much to go through. So we found some of the stuff that we were looking for. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the CAC, Community Associated Clubs, and the title is From a Cow Barn to a Bowling Alley. And some of these pictures kind of show the transition. The first picture here is of the old Hitchcock barn. And this one's a little hard to see. I got one of those high-tech things too. Actually, this is my cat's toy. I couldn't find my professional toy, so I stole it. My cats are going to wonder where the heck it is. But right up here is the old Hitchcock barn. It was built in 1876 and originally used by the old Oneida Community and the Oneida Community Limited as a dairy barn. By 1916, the Oneida Community Limited Athletic Association. This was an association of employees that were interested in sports and activities and all kinds of things. The whole sports thing became much more popular, and it grew and it grew, and they needed more space. So it was determined that the old Hitchcock barn on East Hamilton Ave would be completely rebuilt and renovated. And as time went on, they added bowling alleys and billiard tables and an auditorium, and a stage was added. During HV Noise's reign at Oneida Limited, a round barn was added. You can just barely see it over here. So here's the CAC clubhouse, and over here was another barn. It was round, and it was connected to the big barn. The way it was constructed and designed is the stanchions for the cows were all so that they were facing each other. They all faced in toward the middle. The going theory was that when the cows faced each other, they would feel more sociable, and they were going to get more milk. So that's I don't know if that worked or not, but that's what the idea was. And so when the big barn was converted to the clubhouse, you notice today there's a parking lot there. That building is gone. They took it down because they didn't need that any longer. Here's the clubhouse. This is probably back in around the 1947 era. I stole the picture from Walter Edmonds' book, The First 100 Years, with my high technology camera, a cell phone, and then transferred it over to my computer and dropped it into PowerPoint. So this is, that actually works pretty good these days. And the next photo shows that down there you can see the vintage car there. And then in 1966, this is when we had the 50th anniversary of Sherrill. This is the way the clubhouse looked at that point in time. And then today, the city of Sherrill, well, we'll talk about that, purchased the clubhouse in 2006. And what I thought was really neat, and I didn't realize this, that the name was changed to the Community Activity Center, maintaining the CAC. You can still say that's the CAC clubhouse over there. The city issued bonds back in 2005, just before they were purchasing it, for $765,000. $125,000 was to pay for the land, and $270,000 for the building, and the remaining balance was to do a new roof and renovations and bring it up to code. So this is how it looks today. In fact, a week or two ago, we were going to have some sunny weather. It was a nice sunny day, and I looked at the forecast, cloudy and rain, cloudy and rain. I go, well, I got to get over there. So I drove over and grabbed some pictures of it. So this is the way it looks today. And over here is a police car. Well, I guess what they're doing is renovations on the police department, so the police department are down in where the old youth center was. So they're working over in that area temporarily. As I was researching about the CAC, I noticed some interesting information. I don't know if many of you know, but in February 9th of 1942, the old Sherrill High School was destroyed by fire. Well, I bet the kids said, yeah, we're good, we're out of school for a while, they got to build a whole new school. No, one day off and they were back in school, and they were all over the city. They were in churches and organizations and in the CAC clubhouse. And so they were able to continue school until they could do something like that. Okay, so going back, the community associated clubs, where did this thing get started? And in 1920, it was organized. And I found yellow pages, and I was very careful to turn the pages because it looked like it was going to fall apart. This is the original document that they set up, all of the bylaws, or basically the purpose of the organization. And so here, the objective for the CAC was to promote by means of its club rooms, athletic fields and accessories, good fellowship, acquaintance, entertainment, sports of all kinds, musicals, physical and intellectual developments. Reading in the first 100 years, Pierpont Noyes was in charge of the factory, really believed that employees were more than just workers, that you had this whole concept. It was really the old Oneida Community concept that everybody is an individual and an important person. And so believe that it wasn't just the work environment, it was the other things. Provide entertainment, provide other stuff, activities, clubs, and things. So some more of the objectives here. The objective for the CAC was to promote and provide financially a disability compensation department covering 6 benefits for club members as herein prescribed. So, and you'll notice this was to provide basically social services stuff for the employees. And again, it was also to promote the establishment of a cooperative store in Sherrill, Niagara Falls, Canada Limited, and it was for holders of common stock and limited to club members. And finally, it was to promote and develop a closer relationship between the association, the city, and the company on matters of common interest, and to provide a children's club headquarters and rooms to be self-governing by the children and overseen by the directors of the club. So these are some of the clubs that the original CAC had. And very interesting, life insurance, disability, all that kind of stuff. It was way beyond what anybody, other companies were doing. This really was setting the standard for everybody else. But I highlighted this thing on movies, and it's interesting. Linda gave me some information from a person, Larry Mason, a longtime resident of Sherrill. And Larry wrote, silent movies were brought to Sherrill shortly after the First World War. They were presented in the auditorium of the CAC clubhouse, the old cow barn. They were given on Friday evenings, and admission was 10 cents. This was our only theater. Adults and children attended, but I felt that the program directed more toward the children, however. We saw actors such as Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, comedians Charles Chaplin and Ben Turpin. A show that I remember seeing was Robin Hood and the Thief of Baghdad. There was an evening that I remember very clearly. During the intermission, our scoutmaster, George Ribbleman, entered the auditorium shouting, told us that President Harding had died. Piano company for the movies was provided by Thelma Liddy. Thelma Liddy Company. So the community associated clubs really got it started way back in 1920, and as it came through the years, added more and more things. And it was interesting. As I was doing the research, I ran into an article that was written, and then mentioned the community associated clubs, and my dad, Grant, was the director of that for a number of years. Mr. Steve Peek, who was responsible for so much of the success of the modern CAC, has written about it as follows. So there was part of the quotes of what my dad had written. He said that the community associated clubs combine athletic, educational, recreational activities for all Oneida Limited employees and their families in one organization. And the way he described it was, you have the clubhouse division, you have the Lewis Point division, and you have the nurses division. So under the clubhouse division, you had the CAC clubhouse. They had the modern bowling alleys, and this is probably 1966 time period from this article. Auditorium for sports and entertainment, pool and billiard tables, attractive social rooms for men and women's groups. The upstairs had all kinds of meeting rooms. The Sherrill Youth Center and Sunset Lake recreational swimming areas. So if we look at some of these, bowling happened to be a very, probably the most popular sport, especially in the winter, not that much to do, so bowling was probably it. There were both men's and women's leagues, and the Saturday morning junior division. I remember bowling there. Al Glover, he ran that for a number of years, and it was an awful lot of fun on Saturdays. It ran just a 21-week schedule during the winter months. So this picture is a picture of the old bowling alley, and if you look real carefully, up here you can see all of the pin settings. They were semi-automatic type machines where you actually had the pin. I thought, that's an awesome job. I want to get that when I get older. I had to be 16. I wasn't 16 then. By the time I turned 16, they got rid of those and put in all automatic machines and I couldn't be a pin setter. I thought that was just really neat. But anyways, that's the way it looked. And I went over there the other day, and the alleys have been renovated. It's a new, the wood floors were taken out, and this is all composite type material, so it's up to date. Although the ball returns still come up on that side, so it's got kind of the new updated retro look to it. Okay, Community Associated Clubs was also involved with baseball, and the company was baseball. That has a very rich history here in Sherrill, and going back into 1902, the Egan brothers put Sherrill on the map, and they had 10 brothers. Oh, that's a whole baseball team. Yeah, it was only their brothers. Only the Egan big guys were on this first team. Well, I can remember Bill and I riding with a bat across our bike with a glove on the handle, riding around town, seeing if we could get enough kids to play baseball over in Noyes Park. But they had all the brothers. They could just go out and play baseball when they wanted to. Well, in 1949, my dad stopped playing for the New York Yankees and decided it was time to settle down, and he became the player manager for the community Platters. And in 1949, the Platters won the league pennant that year. So let's go back. This is the first picture. These are the Egan brothers. There's Albert and Ben. Down here. There's Albert, there's Ben, and this is the mascot, John. That's Bob Egan, and it's John's little boy. Center row is John, Ed, Fred, and Charlie. And up here is Albert, Ben, or Bob, Frank, and Joe. Ben was the only brother to make baseball a career. He started playing professionally in 1905 with Rome and Auburn teams in the Empire League. He was going up to catch for Utica in the New York State League in 1908. Connie Mack signed Ben with Philadelphia. He later saw duty with Baltimore, Boston, Cleveland, and Newark. When his playing days were over, he managed Jersey City. So out of all the brothers, he was the one that actually went and started playing pro. There is kind of a rumor that Ben, before Babe Ruth got to be known as the hero and sports wonder that he was, actually had Babe Ruth here for a game that they played. And that's been totally confirmed. Here's a 1949 picture of the Platters. They, my dad started, he was the player coach for the Platters. And so if we take a look at the front row, we've got John Tyson, Steve Poteski, Lee Watson, Nick Toll, and Albert Gilberti. Okay, up here we have Art Keachel, Ted Totten, Mickey Kiff, Herman Frisky, and Joe Cole. And then up here we've got George Cheney, yes, that's it, Jack. George Cheney, Mike Sofranco, Charlie Munger. Let's see, Charlie Munger up here. Let's see. Yeah, there's Tucker right there. Or Ray Bartholomew Tucker. Here's Big Jim Statitis, Ed Cooper. And over here we've got Joe Crane, and there's my dad. The team won the pennant. That's, for the first year really going after this, they really whipped it into shape. Best I can figure, they had 26 wins out of 30 games. So, of course, they had Big Jim Statitis and my dad pitching. they really had the advantage on their side. But the CAC didn't have just men's activities. The next picture is women's basketball. And you can see here that looks like 19, 20, 21. They had a CAC girls basketball team. They recorded a long string of victories from girls teams from Rome, Auburn, Rochester, and Syracuse. And the interest in girls basketball really took off. And they had enough so to support 8 departmental, from the factory, 8 different departments. They had 8 departments girls teams. And they were quite the uniforms of the day. Okay, now under the CAC division was also the Youth Center. And the Sherrill Youth Center was a cooperative program, not just the CAC and United Limited, but it was with the city of Sherrill, the community chest, and the CAC. It was open to residents of Sherrill and the immediate vicinity of high school age. It was open 7 to 10 on Mondays, 7 to 10:30 on Saturdays. It had all kinds of activities and tables. They had a TV room and table tennis and shuffleboard, basketball. They did all kinds of darts, cards, chess, checkers, TV, jukebox. My dad ran it for up until 1977. Al Glover took over then for many years. And to tell you the truth, you talk to some of the people back then, they said, "Oh, you have a neat father." As a growing up, "Oh man, my dad, yeah." However, they said, "He's awesome. You've got a great father." He was the father to an awful lot of kids, and so was Al. Everybody looks up to them, and I think their lives were better for what they did thinking about. I was looking for a picture of the youth center, and this is one. Now, there was no date on the photo. This is the old shuffleboard game thing. I could never play that. My shuffleboard, whatever you call that thing, went off the end and into the end. I never got it to stay on top there. But I'm thinking this has got to be, anybody recognize any of the people there? Yeah, it's got to be early 60s maybe? Oh, all right. Over here? Oh, yeah. So what's your guess of the year? Early 60, 61 too, or something? 63 maybe? Over here? Oh yeah, Brian McKay. Here, over here? Is that Doug Tubman?
Bob? Okay. So anyways, the CAC Youth Center was a big deal. And it was a lot bigger because a lot of cities didn't have stuff like this. This was like groundbreaking. This was stuff that other communities would send people in to see, what is it that you're doing? How are you doing this? What's so wonderful about it? And so they really did work out pretty good there. All right, so also under the CAC was Sunset Lake. Al was going to be talking about that in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. So be sure to take a look at that. 1901, the Oneida Community Community had a Sunset Lake project. And it was supposed to be not a swimming hole, but a storage reservoir to improve the water power to the silk shop, where the knife plant was, and the fruit house. So what they did is they dammed up the Oneida Creek, and right where the Oneida Lake, or the Sunset Lake is today, that was called the Meadow, and it filled up with water and provided a continuous flow for the power. Over the years, the Sunset became a swimming hole, and they put in a swimming program. Most of the kids in Sherrill that I knew and grew up with, that's where you learned to swim. And programs for American Red Cross, junior and senior life-saving. I tell you, Al Glover's senior life-saving class was tough. Water safety, beginner through advanced swimming lessons, and the annual water carnival. All right, so also the CAC had outdoor field facilities, an archery club, and the archery range was actually over in the hills behind the knife plant. And my brother and I, we used to go over and try to hit the target. There was a ravine, and the target would be way across. Well, I only had a 25-pound bow, so rather than shoot at the target, I had to shoot like that. I never made it to target number 28. I ran out of arrows. I lost them all. In fact, I think some of the trees still have some of those arrows stuck in them. Rod and Gun Club, that became big, especially when they put in the trap shooting facility in 1966. The CAC, the Rod and Gun Club did stocking streams, conservation projects, all kinds of talks. I used to like to go to the talks for the Rod and Gun Club because afterwards they had refreshments, and they had the donuts, or those fingers that were frosted from Joel Comfort's Bakery. They were awesome. That's what you went for. You didn't care less about the talk, but you went for the donuts. That's it. Okay, another club or activity was a stamp club. This has got to be 1960 something. I think is that Craig Crawler? No. Oh, okay. Mark Brewster. Marvin Brewster, okay. Kind of looked like Craig Crawler. The picture's not that great. Yeah. Okay, so lots of different activities. The camera club, garden club, they had all of that. So let me move on here. The CAC also sponsored, here's a craft show. They had lots of those over the years. And then the next one, here's the pensioners party. A lot of pensioners. Oneida Limited took care of their pensioners back then. This is a Christmas party, and that's got to be in the 60s. There's Walt Stewart and Darwin Johnson. And so they were big deals. I know my father would get nervous and try to make sure all the details were put together for him. Community Associated Clubs, Nurses Division, okay. They had a group of nurses providing medical benefits. It was organized in 1942 during World War II. And it was to aid the Oneida Limited employees, pensioners, and the dependents with professional nursing assistants. They had 2 traveling nurses or visiting nurses that went around. They maintained an office that you could go to there. Okay, there was also the Lewis Point Division. Lewis Point, how many people here have ever been to Lewis Point? Okay, yeah, that was fun. That was a neat place to go. In fact, if you didn't get there on a Saturday or Sunday by 10 o'clock in the morning, you didn't get a picnic table. You were eating out of the back of the car, right? So a lot of stuff going on there. Most Saturdays, Sundays, it was packed to capacity. Our families always spent 1 week each summer renting one of the cottages. They had 15 cottages that you could rent. We rented the Klein Camp year after year. Saturday nights,
were a big deal at the Lewis Point Hotel. They almost always had live band, and I remember listening to Carl Castle's band. Carl played drums, Art French on trumpet, and they were just awesome. And I think that's why I decided to take up trumpet. That is until I got braces. That didn't work so well. So here's a picture of Lewis Point back in 1910. And then Lewis Point in 1947, 48, somewhere around in there. And this is the clam bake house that they added on. They could seat 300 people for a big clam bake for dinner. All right, the Oneida Community Golf Club. There's some history to the golf club. Pierpont, Illinois brought the club, brought golf to the area in 1900 with a few balls and a couple of clubs. That was it, and they all shared. In 1903, Sunset Lake was created, and what they did is they had 6 golf course holes in the meadow there. Well, when the lake filled up that area, they lost their 6 courses, 6 golf holes. So in 1931, a new course had been designed, and they abandoned the older holes of the CAC course and was focusing mainly on the 9 new course. In 1954, they built a caddy house and a pro shop, and in 1962, the clubhouse was built. In 65 and 66, in that time frame, the Kinsley Farm was purchased, so 9 additional holes, bringing it up to 18 holes, were constructed. What's interesting about that Oneida Community Golf Club was it was the very first course in the U.S. strictly for industrial recreation. It wasn't open to the public. It was for the CAC members and employees of the Oneida. All right, so here's the high-tech lawn mowing equipment that they invested in. They spared no cost. It's interesting to note that the sheep actually did a better job of keeping the grass short than the lawn mowing equipment they had back then. Even after the new course was laid out, the sheep were actually kept as the lawnmowers. In fact, one of the golfers wrote, during the early years, there was no particular attempt to make special areas for greens. They kind of just cut a hole and put a can down in there, and there's your hole. There was one advantage about the sheep. They gnawed everything in sight down so that there was no rough on the entire course. It was impossible to lose a golf ball. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, say to watch the budget, Al. Okay, no, that was my father's favorite saying to Al, running the, gotta watch the budget, Al. Gotta watch it. Can't do that. Gotta watch the budget. Okay, community-associated clubs went out of existence when the factory shut down, and there were no more CAC. City of Sherrill did purchase the CA Clubhouse in 2006, and I like the fact that they named it CAC, or Community Activity Center. Okay, so that brings my talk to an end. I call it the end, but maybe an end to an era. You know, there's something missing today. If you think back, a lot of us going to Lewis Point and doing all of these activities, it's not like that today anymore. It just feels like it's different. I don't know, maybe you call it progress, or we're moving on. Maybe it's our fast-paced life that we're overcommitted, we're way too busy, we've got to run in a million different places. But back then you had the time. If you had to get to Lewis Point at 10 o'clock in the morning to get a table, you had the whole day to relax and take it easy. Sit there, read the paper, watch the kids swimming, you know. I think it's too bad we've lost that kind of life, that it is